Magandang umaga.
Good morning. Should I remove? Okay lang.
Yes.
Tanggal? Okay lang? Alright. Alright, good morning. This is actually the first time I'm going to use a presenter. This is my first talk face-to-face in 2 years. Right. I might get carried away, but Father said I have 3 hours now. Hopefully, isang oras lang. This is by no means the forensic results, meaning in its entirety because the work is ongoing. Alright? What I'm going to do is to first give you an idea of what the process is about. What happened. In public, what has been disclosed is that, yes, remains were exhumed and then cremated. But there's a big chunk of work that went into what happened next, after examination and before cremation. Right? And then next, I would want to give you some findings. And all throughout, actually, I'm going to give my usual scathing criticism of what's wrong in the Philippines. Because this is the reason why, we're not improving. And I will show you we don't really have a proper death investigation system. This is not how you deal with homicides. That's what we have. And that's what we need. A simple homicide investigation for each case. Right? I think this is a photo of Vince Go. Father here, no less than Father Flavi assisting in the collection of the remains. And way before, years before, when there was talk of exhuming the remains because the leases were expiring and so on, I've always said, please let me see them. This is where forensic science comes in. Because what's going to happen is you'll just dispose of the bodies. But they will still tell you a lot. I have received comments like, wala nang masasabi yon, or what more can they tell you, but I'll show you the dead still speak a lot and tell a lot of tales. So this would be, rather than autopsy, I would prefer to use the term post-mortem or after death examination, because they're not really autopsies of these exhumed remains. In the so-called war on drugs, the killing since 2016, take note, this is but a handful of what has happened, who have been killed. On top of these cases referred to me by Father Flavi, I've seen actually several others. Yun yung actually I was able to do full autopsies. All right. Oops. Ayan, okay. All right. So we've had a total of 46 bodies from different areas in Metro Manila here. And you'll see the numbers there. And everything, each body was actually brought to UP Manila. Mainly the examination is in the morgue of the UP College of Medicine. And I have to, express my sincere gratitude to the Department of Radiology, because the first thing we do is to x-ray the remains. And the x-rays are very, very telling. They have been accommodating our requests. Actually, they've been my partner since 26 years ago when I started my forensic pathology practice. Ayaw mag-follow. Ikaw na lang? Alright. Oops, sorry. Go back. Alright. Of the 46 remains, they were exhumed 3 to 9 bodies at the time on 7 different dates. This was from July 8, 2021 to February 28, 2022, the latest. Right? So far, after examination, 35 have been released for cremation. I have 10 cases still pending. The examination is still ongoing. I've only started, this is the hard part, I've only started typing my reports, and so far I have only finished 3. Okay? I keep saying I'm on a treadmill because Father brings me bodies, and then at some point he says, when can we cremate? So I have to release them. All right? So this is not priority right now, but I'm trying my best. All right? And one is just for printing. So I've got about 4 finished. I'm not part of the cremation. I only attended one, actually the best one. A very nice cemetery. It's nothing like the icky public cemeteries in other photos. And Father and his team were given strict instructions to recover everything. Okay? And that's why they have body bags as instructed. And I told them, get everything inside the coffin or what's left of the coffin. And then just put everything in the body bag and bring them to me. So at this point, so they supervise the cremation, and then you've got relatives. And take note, these remains have names. Okay? That helps. These are not what you would call clandestine graves. They have names, but identity is not something we take for granted in forensics. I'll show you later. Right? So there's a body bag. They put the name there. Sometimes they even recover the headstone. And some of the headstones are with me. Okay, next please. All right. So you've got sepultureros or cemetery caretakers. And I think it's a spectrum where you've got the remains in the coffin, although it's already disintegrated. And then they are able to get everything in the body bag. But unfortunately, there are times when Father is not fast enough, and the sepultureros or cemetery caretakers beat him to the exhumation. Next. Right, so of the 46, we received 42 remains in body bags. Right? Next. Unfortunately, these are what I would call the preempted exhumations, where that's it. Father was slow. Or the cemeteries were fast, such that the bodies were already put in, usually sacks. So this is 2144. Next. Oops, 51, and then 52. Oh, by the way, I'm going to refer to the cases as case numbers. As much as possible, I would not identify who they are. Next, please. And 61. So I've got 4. And you know the disadvantage of not being in control of recovering the remains. You miss a lot. I don't see clothing. I don't see personal effects and so on. The bones are incomplete. And I'll show you how important it is that even small fragments of bone are retrieved. Imagine if these remains had bullets, they're gone. Okay, next. Right, so first things first. The bodies are x-rayed. The x-rays tell me what's inside the bags. And for PGH, they accommodate our requests, but they say bring them, after midnight. And so there is a vehicle like this, and the bags are loaded onto the vehicle. Actually, PGH is just a few meters away, but it's a lot easier to bring them all in one trip. Next, please. And this is my resident. Let's give a hand for Dr. Banguero, because all 6, I think, 6 out of the 7 X-ray trips to PJH. He was the one in the middle of the night coordinating everything. Next. All right. So what do the X-rays tell us? I really value the radiologic examination because that's it. Tells me what's inside. Like 42 of them were what you would call completely skeletalized or disarticulated, just a bag of bones. And so that would be easy to prepare for. And also, I want to get an idea, most importantly, is there a bullet inside? Because if there is, I'm going to search for that carefully. Okay? Next. Right. So, 4 of them have been recovered, actually, what I would call fully articulated, meaning there's still soft tissue, the joints are in place, and so on. Of the 4, 1 is mummified, so there's partial skeletalization, and so on. Okay, next. Right. So a typical body bag for the 2 remains would look like this. You've got bones there, bits and pieces of the coffin. As I said, my instruction was if there is still a lining, you know, that inner cloth inside the coffin, wrap the remains there and just bring everything to me. Okay? So I get to examine everything. During the first probably 10 cases, I had pathology residents helping me out, but then we had problems with COVID. Some of them got sick, schedules, etc. And so I decided right now it's just me and a mortician actually working on the remains. Next. All right. So these are X-rays of one case, showing you. That's it. I get to see this is the skull, and there's something here. This looks like a fracture. Bones jumbled altogether. But then, am I seeing the very important bullet? At least in this case, there's none. Okay, next. But I really make it a point to do the sorting out of everything inside the body bag. And for instance, it's easy to pick out the big bones there. The clothes, I separate, and everything else. Okay, so if it's just coffin, casket, material, debris, I would throw them away. Next. Okay, some of them can be kind of messy. You've got a lot of soil, debris, rocks and stones and everything. But take note, this entails really manually sorting through everything. Next. This is me, for instance, recognizing bone. And I would separate that. So everything else can be thrown away, but I really take pains to get as much as I can. Okay, next. And this is, I will have to tell you that this is the creepy part where you get the insects. And these are already the post-bygone treatment insects, already dead. Post-mortem na yan. Post-mortem shot. Because they move around and everything, and I'm afraid they might, populate our morgue. So I have to zap them. The maggots, they're kind of easy. But this is the creepiest part for me. Weird, don't ask me what it is, but it looks like a centipede or a millipede. That's the creepiest. Next. And that's it for some cases. There's a lot of insect activity. These are the eggs and the larvae. And the thing is, if you let the eggs develop into larvae and then they turn into adults and then they're all over the place. So this is mainly for the 3 bodies that we got still articulated. And I had to do the examination actually outside near the exit of the morgue just to let the flies go out. Next. All right. So I've got a tray here. And even if it's not that important, I recover what I can. Meaning, this is hair. And then the bones. Okay, next. And then they're washed. And so you've got hair over here, the bones. These are the phalanges or the digits of fingers, hands. That's a tooth. Very important, especially if you're dealing with identification. And also bits and pieces of bone, because I'm going to look for injuries, remember? Okay, next. Right. So where do I examine the remains? Unfortunately, our morgue is under renovation, so we have space constraints. I just had to search for a place, and this is a classroom repurposed into an examination room. These are laboratory tables sourced from the junkyard. And then I just put black lining cartolina, okay, for laying out the bones. So this is post-washing. The body bags are under, and then I would lay them on the table, like this one. This is what's typically done. This is forensic archaeology, anthropology, actually. So you've got the remains on this long table, and you actually arrange the bones in anatomic position. Okay, this is standard. So head over here, feet over there, right side, left side. And as I said, I don't throw the hair away, it's there. And the remains are examined. Actually, if I were an anthropologist with lots of time, I would do the standard, what we call inventory. So each bone has to be checked. But I don't have the time for that. And I am not really an anthropologist, but I have had training in forensic anthropology. Next. Okay, so it's something like this. I have a lot of photos. For each case, I probably have 60 plus digital pictures. So you document. There are questions of identity. As I said, even if there is a name, you do not take that for granted. In fact, I have one case that I'm putting on hold because it's said to be an 18-year-old, and it doesn't look like an 18-year-old. So we're going to try and do DNA analysis for that, just to check. Because for some cases, maybe the relatives were looking for someone. We don't have a death investigation system. Someone is missing. So what do relatives do? They go to the different funeral parlors. And maybe they said, okay, that's my son, that's my father, or whatever. And then they simply got the wrong body. Okay? Anyway, we're checking that. So, identity, general things like, aside from age, what's the sex? Is this really male or female? And stature, estimate, at least. Next, please. Okay. And then individual bones, oops, go back. Individual bones are checked. Like this is the elbow region of one arm, same case. And there is a huge fracture here. And that has to be documented. Next. Right? So this is one, same case with the elbow fracture. And I've got lots and lots of pics of the skull in particular, because the skull tells you a lot. For instance, the teeth have to be documented. Okay? This is your autopsy, quote unquote, cut that the previous doctor did. And I tell you, this is not the right way to open the skull. If you're a pathologist or trained in pathology, your cut is going to be wider like that. But this is the typical medico-legal autopsy cut of the head. Okay? What am I documenting here? The fractures. What is that hole doing there, and so on. So bits and pieces of bone, we got this skull very much fragmented. And that's why I said I want to get all the small fragments because we piece it together. Okay, next. Because that's how you get to identify the wholes that matter. Like for instance, same case, fragments of bone. Here, there is a significant hole here, which is consistent with an entrance wound. Why do I say that is an entrance wound from gunfire? It's because of what we call the internal beveling over there. It's the erosion of the inner surface. Next. Okay, like this one. Internal beveling means its entrance. Okay, there's the entrance. Okay, this is how it looks from outside. Next. And this is consistent, more consistent with an external beveling or exit. In the head, actually, it's easier to identify the gunshot wounds because when you get shot, chances are your skull will be affected and the skull remains even 5 years after and you still see the damage. I'm having a lot more problems with the trunk. Why? Because I'm seeing a lot of post-mortem artifacts. The bones fragment, disintegrate, etc., erode, etc. And that's why I take a lot of photos because when the time comes, I'm going to refer them all to an anthropologist and maybe to verify the findings. What else? You may get gunshot wounds of the trunk without hitting bone, especially in the abdomen. Okay, so he may have been shot here, but I'm not seeing it anymore. Okay, for the extremities, I'm getting sometimes, that's it, fractures of the long bones. But at the same time, again, same thing, you may have some soft tissue damage without producing skull fractures. Next. Okay. Basically, this is my teaching slide, classic teaching slide. Why do you investigate deaths? You establish the fact of death, identity, who died, why, that's cause, and manner is how. Okay? And, of course, you gather evidence. This is classic. This is basic. Next. For identification, I mentioned this already. For the remains I've examined, I try to estimate age, what is the stature. You know, there are ways. I measure 3 long bones of each side, upper and lower extremity. And then there are formulas wherein you plot the length and then you get an estimate of, you know, the stature. Do you know that in the Philippines, we don't even have formulas specifically for Filipinos? So I'm going to have to use studies from abroad for Asian people. Okay? That's how backward we are in forensic science. Right, teeth. I just document them. And unfortunately, this is not your population, I think, with dental records. In fact, I've said over and over again, this war on drugs targeted the poorest of the poor. Why? I see the teeth, and they're so awful. I've seen only about 3 or 4 cases with dentures. But generally, my idea is these are people who may not have even seen a dentist at all in their life. Okay? But just the same, I document that. And then routinely, I retain a bone sample. And the easiest is the patella. That's the kneecap. Because the DNA analysis lab of UP Diliman, my suki, my friends, have had success in using that as a sample. But for that particular case where we're going to really do, I hope, DNA analysis, going to get more than the patella for that. Next. Okay. All right. Let's move on. The Philippine death certificate. I really have to discuss this because actually for all of those cases, this is practically all I have. Meaning, this is that one document available. And actually, I don't know if you can see the numbers. The one below, none. There's one of the 46 without a death certificate, which is crazy. How come the family does not even have a copy? Hindi pa ba yan online? Meaning, searchable, and so on. And only 19 would be what I would call complete. That means, actually, the first page is there. Why? The problem with our Philippine death certificate is there are 2 pages. Meaning, on the back, for some doctors, they write the cause of death on the back page. And I only get the front page. Kahit na anong kulit ko kay Randy, hindi siya makaproduce ng 2 pages. Okay? So, 26 are incomplete. And I don't even know the cause of death as certified. Okay, next. Right. So, as far as cause of death concerned, this is actually also crazy because akala ko you're not supposed to, everything should be typewritten, formal, and so on. But I've seen a lot of handwritten cause of death statements. And see here, what does it tell you? Multiple gunshot wound. It's not what we call etiologically specific. How did he die? Okay? So this is the norm in the Philippines that you simply just say, that's it, multiple gunshot wound. You don't even explain, right? And the bottom line, death by external causes, that's the part where manner of death, if it's not natural or due to disease, should be indicated. And generally, it's blank, right? And in this particular case, there's a box there that says autopsy, yes, no, and it's no. Next. Oops, sorry, it's not that clear. But this is another entry. This time it says multiple gunshot wound to different parts of the body. Okay? And again, it doesn't make sense. Okay? And there's a stamp below. I see this. For burial purposes only. And again, does it mean that the doctor does not know anything about the case, but simply wrote something there just to get the body buried? Next. Okay. This is an NBI autopsy or autopsy case or referred to NBI. And this is their practice that they will just say cause of death, NBI, and then blah, blah, blah case number. Again, it doesn't make sense. If you're the one who did the autopsy, you're supposed to clearly say on the front page what is the cause of death. And in all of these cases, I have had no access to the actual examination. Okay? And if you ask the families, were they given a copy of the findings? I don't think so. Is it accessible? Was it even completed? I don't think so. I think there's only one case where I got a 1 to 2 page autopsy report, but that's about it in the 46 cases. Next. Okay. This is the contentious one. He was known to have been shot, but the doctor cited the cause of death as acute myocardial infarction. On the right side, I think that's 3 hours or something. And then, that's the implication, due to hypertension, and then I can't make out what's on the right side. But this is a case where he was violently killed. And yet, the doctor wrote a natural cause. And we have actually a collection of these, I think 7. I have seen this also in one of my autopsy cases, also a war on drugs victim. And clearly, no, he did not die of a natural cause. Next. All right, so again, a summary. As far as date of death is concerned, these 46 cases died from June 15, 2016 to August 13, 2017. Take note, of the 46 cases, 16 were killed with another person on the same date. Okay? 10 were related, father, son, brothers, husband, wife, or partners. And the place of death and residence is the same in 16. I might have made some mistakes in the count, but I take note of this. I'm not too sure if the place of death and the residence, are the same. Does it mean that they were killed at home? Because some of the places where they were killed actually were alleys or shanties, and these are informal settlers. So I don't know, because I have no access, as I said, to the circumstances, investigation, and so on. Next. Right. Sex. Of the 46, only 2 were females. And take note, they were killed with the spouse or partner. Okay? So most targeted are the males. The age, the youngest is 17, the oldest is 55. Marital status, 27 are said to be single, 19 with married or with a partner. Next. Occupation, this is very telling. This is just a death certificate. Again, 1 had no death certificate, so I wouldn't know what was in there. 17 had none, really specifically stated there. 8, nothing was written there under occupation. And then you have a collection of construction workers, scavenger, painter, housewife, driver, pedicab driver, electrician, vendor, welder, tireman. I have no idea what is a vatilyo. Maybe somebody can help me. I tried to Google that. I couldn't find it. Ano yun? Mason? Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Okay. But what is this telling us? Again, the poorest of the poor doing menial jobs or really jobless. Okay, next. All right. In the death certificate, it indicates that 20 may not have had an autopsy at all, or it's not known, but there were names of doctors from the PNP in 23. And then, as I said, 3 apparently were done by NBI. Next. Okay. Of the remains, I examined the 46 to confirm that there was some sort of an examination. 27 had head cuts. This is easy because you can really recognize the narrow cut in the head. So there's some sort of a previous autopsy. The chest cuts, it's more difficult. The usual cut is at the ribs here. And sometimes you can recognize, okay, these are from autopsy, but sometimes not. Okay, none in 9. And as I said, I have 10 more with ongoing examinations. Next. Next. Okay. Cause of death as certified in the death certificate. 28 explicitly said there were gunshot wounds. Again, in some death certificates, it's blank, incomplete, or unknown in 11. And this is, again, the contentious 7 cases where, take note, they were shot and yet, look at the cause of death. Sepsis, acute myocardial infarcts, 2 had pneumonia. There's a hypertension, there's cerebrovascular accident, that's a stroke, bleed, hypertension, and then acute myocardial infarction, hypertension. So how can that be? You have doctors staking their reputation, their name, their license, falsifying death certificates. There's a law against this. Okay? All right, and this is that part where, finally, we can get to see how wrong they were because you have the remains. Next. What about manner of death? Since we don't have a death investigation system, in the Philippines, this is hardly taken seriously. That part where it says external causes, blah, blah, doctors don't routinely check something, okay, if it's unnatural. So in 31 cases, none. Only 6 cases, because these are all properly called homicide, OT6 had homicide written there. I remember one even had it misspelled as homicide. And the 7, I showed you earlier, actually the implication is it's natural. Because if you don't write anything there, then it's implied natural. Okay. What is 1 others? There's a space there for others. And someone actually, a doctor actually ticked that others without even saying what it is. Okay? And as I said, for one case, I have no death certificate, so I wouldn't know. Next. Confirmed by examination, the cause of death. So far, this is not final yet. Of the 46, I saw evidence of gunshot wounds in 32. Of the 32, I saw evidence of gunshot wounds in the head. And I'll be showing you 3 cases later where aside from a gunshot wound to the head, apparently there's blunt trauma as well. Right? I have 4 where I'm still iffy, whether it's gunshot wound or not, especially because it's in the chest, and 10 still ongoing. Next. All right. What about crime scene? Again, if you're a forensic pathologist, this is a must, that you know where and how this body was recovered. And of all the cases, there's only 1 picture of a crime scene for this case, 2128. And what does it tell me? Well, I can correlate this with the autopsy or the examination findings. Next. So you're seeing him with a restraint at the back of the hands and blood underneath the head. So he's face down on the ground. So this would be his skeletal remains. And everything is centered in the skull. Next. Okay. Shots of the skull. I'm missing a lot of bone here, which limits my conclusion. But, you know, carefully piecing together, I think for this case, I had a resident gluing this part, helping me. Okay? We recognize 2 holes in the head, 1 near the top, 1 near the left back, which are consistent with gunshot wounds of N3. So he was shot in the head 2 times. Next. Okay? And I can tell from the fracture lines which actually came first. So this is how forensic pathology works. He was shot first, okay, here at the back of the head on the left. And then the second one was on the top, near the top on the right. Okay? And remember how he was found on the ground, face down, lots of blood under the head. Most likely that is the death scene. That was how he was killed and where he was killed. And I imagine what happened to the bullets. Most likely they exited. I'm not too sure about this, but defects in the bone parts missing. But there's something there that suggests one could have exited in the right temporal region. How important is this? You have a finding like this, you feed it to the investigators. Investigators would now what? Search for the bullets, because most likely the bullets are embedded underneath. So I once voiced out this idea, what if we can identify that scene and actually search the area for bullets? But of course, that's near to impossible now, 5 years after. Next. Okay. Of the fully articulated remains, so this is that part where I give you some findings, right? They're the ones that I finished early because there's a lot more to work on, although it's not that easy also because they're decomposed. So this would be the 3 cases occurring on deaths occurring October 4, December 23, and December 29, all in 2016. And they were all exhumed from one cemetery. And that particular cemetery was the nice one I went to. Next. Okay. So this is one case. after, you document, you remove the insects and everything. You have to forgive me, the pictures are graphic, especially yung mga pamilya po, okay lang kayo. Huwag nyo na lang tingnan. Okay, anyway, because this is how it is. This is the real work. This is what I've been doing, okay? What do I recognize? Something has been repaired here. May tahi, oh. And I think there was injury there. Hindi mo na mahanap yung mga discoloration, hemorrhage, etc. Kasi decomposed na yan. Next. Okay? And then this is that part where you look at what we call the base of the skull. Right? And I see fractures here. Same side as the apparent injury on the forehead and left eye. And I think, is this gunshot wound? But then for you to have a gunshot wound, iba itsura eh. You're not going to see an isolated fracture here, it extends over there. Dapat yung bala, tinamaan niya all the way. Okay? So, this is not gunfire. Next. There is a hole here. This is the right back of the head. But as I said, it does not connect at all to that. Right? And when I examine this some more, this is what you would call a keyhole fracture. If you can imagine yung butas ng key, yung the classic old style. We call that in forensic a keyhole fracture, and that indicates it's a grazing. You know, the bullet partially entered, but then exited as well. Okay, next. And this is that body which X-ray showed has a bullet somewhere in the head. Okay? And so I had just had to retrieve it, I had just had to dissect, etc. That's the keyhole fracture, and this is the back part. Assisting me here was Rafi. He was there when we had a eureka moment and found this bullet. Okay, next. All right. And I would document all of these things if this would be my scratch paper. Forms here, so everything is here. Next. Body diagrams. All right. Since I was dealing with somebody with some flesh still, I could still mark that injury on the forehead and left eye. He had a sutured lesion here, probably, I don't know where the bullet partially exited. I don't know. It happens. And then I saw sutured lesions in the right upper arm, here in the back, which probably would be the gunshot wounds actually reported in the death certificate of the trunk. Okay? What else? X-rays clearly showed a complete, complicated, complex fracture of the right arm. Again, consistent with the gunshot wound, and so on. Next. And the base of the skull, as I said, would be more consistent with blunt force. This would be more consistent with gunshot. Next. And this is one case where, the same case, where it says, medical legal case, see at the back. Fortunately, I have the back page. Next. This was how it was signed out. Multiple gunshot wound, head and trunk. Next. But you know, the examination should give you a lot more. And I was left with just decomposing remains. But I was still able to say, yes, he had a penetrating gunshot wound of the head with a grazing entry in the right occiput. I recovered the bullet from the right back of the head. I had to say, there's also blunt force injuries. Those are blunt force. A probable laceration here, and fractures of the frontal and the left temporal skull, and the probable gunshot wounds of the trunk. There's a perforating gunshot wound of the right upper arm. See, he was previously autopsied, and yet a bullet was recovered. It happens a lot. Okay, next. And this is the front page, also on the front page of my report. I have an opinion. This is a summary. He was 33 years old, allegedly shot several times. This is as far as, I can go with the minimal information given me. Outside his residence, fixing his pushcart on this day. Autopsy, reportedly by PNP, cause of death, as I showed you. Embalmed, buried. And then this is the batch we exhumed on October 7. And unfortunately, there's advanced decomposition, changes from embalming, previous autopsy, and this would be the major findings consistent with gunshot wounds and blunt trauma, as well as gunfire injuries of the chest and right upper extremity. And clearly, I would classify this case as homicide. Okay? This is another case, and that's it. This is how I get them really decomposing. Next. And same process of documenting. Next. With diagrams and so on. But I'm showing this because it's very similar to the second case I'm going to show you. And in fact, just might be similar also to the first one. Because he had a gunshot wound entry on the left occiput. Okay? Apparently, aside from that, there's another wound here. So it went through and through. But again, he had fractures that you cannot just attribute to that gunshot wound. Okay, next. There's a hole. There's my probe. So it connects to most likely an exit wound here. Again, you see the the autopsy, quote-unquote, cut. These are the fractures I am curious about because they are different. They're not from gunshot or gunfire. Next. And I document them a lot, like this one. This is what you would call a depressed fracture. In fact, it would be patterned. It tells you, suggests to you what weapon was used, most likely something hard and long. Okay? And most likely, I believe, some of the fractures over here could be related to that kind of force. Next. And therefore, for this case, there is a perforating gunshot wound of the head, entry left occiput, exit right parieto-temporal. In this case, I can tell you the trajectory. That's how the bullet went in the body. But at the same time, just like the first case, he had blunt force trauma for all of those fractures and so on. Again, this is supposedly autopsied, but very limited findings as reported. Next. And this is my next case, opinion for that case. Right? Allegedly a drug user, shot several times, similarly unidentified assailants. So I'm not too sure if this is part of the 6,000 something count of PNP. Probably not. And again, just a summary of the findings. Head injuries, gunfire, blunt force, homicide. Next. Right. For that particular case, thank you for providing me, my media friends, some sort of a case file. And it's kind of impressive if you look at it because it's about a quarter of an inch thick. Whereas in other cases, I only have a death certificate. But if you scrutinize what's in that case file, it doesn't say anything. There is a certification, look, consummated murder, that the victim is a drug user. It's kind of meant to support the narrative that he was killed because of some relation with drugs. There are two Soko pictures, but they're so bad. It's not something useful for documenting the scene. There is a conduct of background information collection, and again, this is a conclusion there that he is a known drug pusher retailer. There's some checklist of death under investigation, victims folder, a profile of the victim, incident report. There not informative at all. Next. And then the bulk of that thickness is due to paperwork. Request for this, request for that, but there's nothing here about the result. Okay? Nothing. Next. And what else? So 5 days after the shooting, there's a progress report. And this is what is there, that the victim is a known drug pusher, Taylor, and included in the station's drugs watch list. And that they did a tracker team, they composed a tracker team, continuously conducting follow-up investigation for possible identity and arrest of the suspect. And there's a statement there, final report to follow. Next. So this was 2016. What happened? This would be the last pieces of paper there. There's a certification from one court that he had no pending criminal case. There's a request for a death certificate 3 months after. So you see what kind of a police investigation file there is. Next. Doesn't explain anything. Next, please. Okay. It has a lot of similarities to another case because there's also a gunshot wound of the left back of the head. Most likely exited also on the other side. Okay. And at the same time, those patterned longitudinal fractures that are consistent with blunt trauma. Next. Next, please. Ayan. So, this is that third case. Again, entrance wound, back of the head. Apparent exit wound, right temple. You see the similarity? Next. Okay. So, there is the track of the bullet, most likely. But at the same time, just like that second case, he had fractures inconsistent with gunfire. And that's why I'm thinking he was hit on the head with a similar weapon, just like that second case. Next. And so again, very similar. Perforating gunshot wound. Trajectory is very similar. Also the blunt force, etc. Next. And for this case, I had the, this is valuable that there is some element of, a story as to what happened. And as we can glean from the records, he was believed to be a drug personality, included in the watch list, blah, blah, blah. Allegedly, he was shot several times, and so on. And this was how the death was certified, gunshot wound head. Very simplistic. But this helps me a lot. The account that he was hit with a hard tube, okay? Shot, right hand cut off, okay? But from the examination, his hands were intact. He may have had a cut, but it was not really cut off. I'm not going to see any more the soft tissue injuries there. But I do confirm he sustained a gunshot wound in the head, but at the same time, he had blunt trauma, so he was hit in the head. He may have had other injuries, but the thing is, I'm just limited to the bone. Okay? And yes, that long, narrow weapon could be a metal pipe or a tube. Next. Okay? So the partner said that the decedent was hit with a hard tube on the face and body, maybe. Cut off right hand, no. Was shot 5 times in the head. I only saw evidence of 1. Next. So that's what forensic pathology is about. Okay, we're running down. 5 bullets were actually recovered from 4 bodies previously autopsied by no less than the Philippine National Police. How do they miss it? They don't do x-rays. That's the beauty of doing x-rays. You wouldn't know if there's a bullet there and where to search if you don't have x-rays. And that 5th body where we found the bullet was the one where the doctor signed the cause of death as acute myocardial infarction and hypertension. And interestingly, we found 2 bullets, but they're unfired. Next. Okay, so this would be the 5 cases with bullets. This was embedded in the pelvis. Next. This was somewhere in the head, so it was not in the bone, etc. It was there. And you really have to carefully search the remains. Next. Oh, it's not that clear, but somewhere here there's a bullet, and actually that's the one where I found it in the right back of the head. Next. Okay, there also. Next. And this is that case where it was signed out as acute myocardial infarction and hypertension. Okay. This is the mummified case. Next. This one. He's the one. He's the one. And just to show you, this is what I'm seeing. Really bad teeth. The poorest of the poor. Okay, so that's documented. So he was really mummified. And when I flipped the head over and the body over, I saw this. So there's a fracture and a defect over here. Next. And I really tried to piece together fragments to see. Okay, at first I thought, is this not blunt trauma? But then, you try and process it a lot at home, in bed, and I decided, I don't think this is blunt trauma. This is actually probably, but I have not decided yet, gunfire as well. Why? My arguments would be, this part of the head, the skull, is thick. So if you hit someone with a hard object like that, I don't think it's going to produce a fracture like this. I think this is more consistent with gunfire. I just might call it a gunshot wound of the head. Next. Okay, so I found a bullet in the left trunk. Okay, fractures also in 2 ribs, left side. Probably this is related to that bullet. Okay, and again, just to emphasize, this is that case where the doctor called it natural. Next. Okay. I would end the presentation with the interesting artifacts I see. Yes, I get the funeral clothes, but rather than funeral clothes, you know what is more helpful? The actual clothes they were wearing when they were killed. I have no access to that. In the Philippines, that gets thrown away by the funeral parlors, sometimes even the emergency room. Most body bags also had other items like other garments. What is this for? It's a token. You send off your dead loved one with stuff to use. Footwear and different personal stuff. Okay? And I'm going to show you this curious unfired bullets. Next. Here. I don't know if you can see that. It looks like a handgun. It's obviously unfired. It's a itsura pa lang. Okay, next. I got that. Also this one, but this one is more of a rifle, but unfired. And incidentally, I'm not too sure if you can see it. Meron ding yung clamp, hemostat, probably left by the embalmer. All right. What is this for? We're speculating and thinking that this is some sort of an amulet or whatever, or they just planted, the relatives planted, but I need to confirm this for what, justice, whatever. But in this particular case, this rifle bullet, I had a very hard time searching for it because I had already gone over the remains and the clothes, and I still could not find it. You know where I found it? In a wallet. It was deep inside the wallet. So maybe in life he was already carrying this, and maybe in life he's the type who would send the X-ray machines, alarm go off or whatever. Okay, next. Oh, the other thing here is the bullets. I think if they were directly cremated, they could have posed a danger to the crematorium. Next. All right, so I get this a lot. This is case number 34. The males are dressed in formal Barong Tagalog, underwear, etc., briefs. I love the socks because they keep the bones intact, the foot bones intact, right? And I get to commune with the patients. I see the dead, and I wonder, in life, he had a very menial job. But in death, they tried to send him off in a grand formal shirt that he probably would never have worn in his life. All right? So there's an effort. And I don't forget that I am dealing with people. Okay? You must never forget that. Next. Right? This is one case where he had no less than a backpack as a send-off. And all of these items were inside the backpack. Next. The usual stuff, the ribbons with the names that they pin on the casket. I don't throw them away. I collect them. Okay? Probably the entire clan over here with so many names there. I collect them. Next. Okay, next. Ayan. Even small things. I don't know the significance. Why am I seeing candy wrappers? Maybe they put it with the body. I'm seeing coins also. So money, candy, remnants of cigarettes. So I collect them still. Next. Stuff like eyeglasses. There's a watch. A lot of religious items. Next. Like this one. A metal cross that actually showed up on X-ray. And I got them on the two bodies. They were husband and wife. Next. Okay. And I'm leaving you with this. This is the most intriguing artifact ever. In case number 39, cause of death was pneumonia. Aside from 2 rings, see the very interesting baller here. Best find ever. Okay. Next. All right. So that concludes my presentation. As I said, this is how you get away with murder in the Philippines. There is simply no death investigation, no way by which we're going to get these killers. And that's why we have serial killers on the loose by now. I don't know how this is going to improve with the next administration. I hope we do get a better administration. Thank you very much and good morning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raquel Fortun. Masyadong maraming data.